First of all, there wasn't a lot new in this budget. Frankly, the economic statement was in the last fall was more of a budget for us in terms of infrastructure. One of the things, though, that does come to mind, and we have to remember, is think back 15 years or so, we would have to use word search to find the word infrastructure in a budget, and yet this budget, again, shows the high priority that this government continues to give to infrastructure investment. So you've got to be encouraged by that. Yes, it talks a lot about details to come, but it's very important for the government to get it right, to ensure that we have the right instruments in place to have a program that actually will be effective. Since in particular you're dealing with 3 levels of government on the co-funded projects, so that makes it pretty important. But not a heck of a lot new in this budget from an infrastructure point of view. I think it's very important to get that right. And there's been a lot of speculation recently about what the role that bank's going to take. And I think this time around, it certainly appears more precise to say that it's targeting the larger projects, the $100 to $200 billion projects, and indeed may well be looking to leverage private capital for investment in important economic infrastructure in Canada, including privately held, not just publicly held. And so if that's where the bank is going, if that's the role it's going to play, if that's the gap it's filling, then we really got to get it right, because in order to attract that kind of private sector investment, you want to make sure you've got a sound foundation going in. This government has been very clear to us right from the get-go that it wanted to see the pendulum that unfortunately had been at both edges of the swing back in the medium rest position, so that there is a role for the temporary foreign worker program when truly we cannot find the domestic resources to provide the necessary labor that we need. So it's still part of the solution. It's not the best solution. Yeah. The other thing, this government has made it very clear in previous budgets that it wants to see a better transition from the temporary worker program to permanent entry, and we're all for that. In fact, the previous government put a program in specifically for our industry in the Canadian Experience class to try and encourage that. So anything that makes the temporary foreign worker program more efficient, something that we can rely on a more timely basis when required, when needed, is certainly applauded by our industry. There's little the federal government can do, quite frankly, because apprenticeship and training are, to a great degree, are provincial areas of jurisdiction. However, the federal government has made strides in the previous budget to help finance or fund making apprentices more mobile, trying to make seeing more uniform approach to apprenticeship training in each of the provinces. That certainly is a positive result from our perspective. The federal government continues to fund organizations like the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum that are badly needed to advance apprenticeship on a national basis. So from our perspective, not seeing it in this budget is not necessarily a disappointment, not necessarily means that anything has changed as far as the federal government support for apprenticeship and training. The proof is in the pudding, the devil's in the detail. We really don't know what's there. There was some talk about innovation funding being available on a competitive basis to certain clusters, and they included transportation and infrastructure. The details on that are a little unclear as to how that's specifically going to work, and where the construction industry might take advantage of that new funding. So we'll have to wait and see to what extent, how that plays out, and whether there is a role. There are organizations that we've helped create that we would have liked to see front and center in that endeavor, the Canadian Construction Innovations, for example. So I think it's a wait-and-see game a bit on finding out more details on how those new initiatives are going to work. The substantive new program was announced in the fall fiscal update, and certainly that's an area that our industry has been pushing for some time, to try and prioritize some of our infrastructure reinvestment to ensure that we're investing in those areas that are going to grow the Canadian economy, that are going to have the most positive impact and return on investment, if you will, for all taxpayers. And that's an area that's very important because it's not just public infrastructure. It's not just government-owned infrastructure. A lot of that critical infrastructure is privately held, whether it's railways, whether it's port facilities, whether it's airports. So from that perspective, it's very important I think, for the federal government to take a strong leadership role in that area. And you know, that kind of infrastructure is also tied to the great areas of potential investment we want to see in northern Ontario, with the Ring of Fire, in northern Quebec with Plan Nord, and in many other areas of the north where you hear constantly that the biggest impediment to large investments from the private sector is the lack of infrastructure, or uncertainty as to how that government and private sector are going to work together to ensure that baseline infrastructure is in place so that they can make those investments. And that's, quite frankly, what we're hoping the new Canadian Infrastructure Bank, that's the gap, that's the role that they're going to address in trying to ensure that the private sector knows that the federal government is a partner in trying to address those large publicly or privately held infrastructure projects that are so key to Canada's economy. And yeah, that's roads, that's transportation, et cetera, but it also can mean very, very large projects, pipeline projects, et cetera. So we're very excited to see the government shine a light on those projects, shine a light on the importance of those types of projects, and are very much looking forward to working with the government to identify those top priority projects and to see what we can do to try and accelerate their conclusion.